Ever think about those companies, like the ones that were totally on top of their game,
Hmm.
then boom, the world changed and they just couldn't keep up?
Oh, yeah,
Like
totally.
Kodak, right?
Yep.
Photography giants totally missed the whole digital thing.
Missed it big time.
Nokia, remember them?
Oh, yeah, the kings of mobile phones.
Totally. And then smartphones happened.
Yeah.
Poof!
Still gone.
And good old AOL, right? Early internet, huge.
Yeah.
Couldn't handle the broadband, boom.
You see it all the time, these once massive companies just fumbling when their world shifts.
Exactly. It's like history is just full of these stories. But then you have Netflix.
Netflix, yeah.
Over just 15 years, they didn't just like navigate one or two of these huge industry shakeups.
Right.
They went through four. It's it's wild, a total reinvention story, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. When you consider how tough it is for a company to pull off a single successful pivot, Netflix's journey, it's just remarkable. From mailing DVDs to like a global streaming giant making all these award-winning shows and movies,
Yeah.
it really makes you wonder, how did they do it? What were those core principles that allowed them to not just survive these massive changes, but actually thrive?
And that, my friend, is exactly what we're diving into today on the deep dive.
Yeah.
You sent us some really interesting excerpts from No Rules Rules, Netflix and the Culture of Reinvention by Reed Hastings and Erin Meyer, and we're going to break them down for you. It's like we're your expert guides through these insights, right? Our mission today is to figure out how Netflix managed these incredible shifts and, more importantly, what you can learn from their approach.
Yeah.
How to like really grasp this information quickly, get to those aha moments without getting bogged down in the details.
Love it.
And it's not just about their business decisions, it's about the whole culture that allowed them to make those decisions, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. That's what the book really digs into, you know?
Yeah.
Those foundational principles behind Netflix's success, especially how they built this high-performing, adaptable culture. It wasn't just about reacting to change, it was about creating a company that was like designed to embrace change.
Okay, so let's rewind all the way back to the beginning. It's easy to look at Netflix now, this global streaming powerhouse,
Right.
and forget that they started with a pretty humble, pretty analog idea. Movies by mail, late 90s.
Yeah.
They saw what Amazon was doing with books and thought, hey, why not movies?
Right. Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph, they were inspired by Amazon's success, but they hit this immediate roadblock: the cost of mailing VHS tapes.
Oh, yeah, those things were chunky.
$4 each way. It was crazy.
Yeah,
Really limited their potential customers and profits.
and think about it. This was like the peak Blockbuster era. I mean, can you imagine?
Oh, yeah.
The book even talks about this meeting in 1999 between a super nervous Reed Hastings and Blockbuster CEO John Antioco, who seemed totally untouchable at the time.
Such a contrast, right? You had Hastings, totally anxious. Netflix, this tiny startup, 2 years old, like 100 employees, 300,000 subscribers, losing a ton of money, $57 million that year. And then you have Antioco, CEO of this giant company, thousands of stores, totally at ease, expensive suit. It's hard to believe Netflix would even exist a few years later, let alone take over the whole industry.
It really shows you how unlikely their success seemed at that point. Blockbuster was like this giant, it was unthinkable that someone could topple them. But that brings us to those four massive transitions that Netflix pulled off. And we need to like really spell these out to appreciate just how adaptable they were.
Absolutely. Over 15 years, we're talking about some huge leaps. First, from mailing DVDs to streaming older shows and movies online.
Huge.
Then from streaming licensed content to making their own original stuff produced by outside studios.
Yeah.
You know, House of Cards was a big one from that era.
Oh, yeah. House of Cards. That was the start of something big.
Their third move, going from licensing external content to building their own in-house studio, that's when we got those massive hits. Stranger Things, La Casa de Papel, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
The stuff that put them on the map, really.
And finally, they went from a USA-only company to a global phenomenon, streaming in 190 countries.
It's mind-blowing when you list it out like that. And the book makes this point. Most companies just can't handle even one big industry shift. To go through four, that's almost unheard of. It's like Blockbuster went bankrupt in 2010.
Yeah.
Couldn't adapt at all.
Hmm.
So what was different about Netflix? What was the foundation that made them so adaptable? You know, the book talks a lot about talent density. What does that even mean in the context of Netflix?
It's pretty simple at its core. Talent density means having a workplace where almost everyone is a top performer, a rock star. The book calls them stunning colleagues, and the idea is that a team like that, full of these amazing people, can achieve so much more and so much faster then a team with, a mix of performance levels. And Netflix was really deliberate about this. It was like their top priority. And it's not just about hiring smart people, it's about the impact those people have on each other, that energy, that drive. It allows them to move faster, innovate more, and adapt quicker when things change.
But here's the thing. A key moment for them was the 2001 layoffs.
Mm.
And that seems counterintuitive, right? How does losing people lead to a better company?
It was a real turning point for Reed Hastings, a kind of accidental discovery. After they acquired Pure Software, the dot-com bubble burst, and the whole tech sector took a nosedive. Netflix had to make some big layoffs.
Ouch.
Yeah. But afterwards, something interesting happened. The whole vibe of the office improved dramatically. People were more productive, morale was higher. It wasn't just about saving money. They realized that by letting go of people who weren't top performers or who brought down the mood, the whole team dynamic shifted.
So it's like removing the weakest link to make the whole chain stronger.
Exactly. They realized even a few underperformers can have a ripple effect. They can slow everyone down, lower the bar, and even make it seem like, being average is okay. And that led to a core part of their culture. Hire the best, pay them top dollar, but be willing to let them go if they're not consistently exceeding expectations.
Tough but fair. And this is where Patty McCord enters the scene.
Yeah.
She seems to have been really important in shaping this culture. What was her background? How did she influence Netflix's approach to talent?
Patty was a real game changer. Hastings first met her at Pure Software. She came from an HR background, so basically she was a people expert.
Okay.
She had worked at Sun Microsystems, and she just cold called Hastings, said she wanted to run HR for Pure. And right away, Hastings was impressed by how direct she was. She even told him their first meeting was kind of a disaster, but that honesty, that was what he was looking for. She was this HR guru, great storyteller, understood people, which was totally different from Hastings, who's more of a math guy, a software engineer.
Right.
Hastings thought about people in terms of processes, algorithms, while Patty was all about emotions and relationships. That balance was key in those early days of Netflix.
Okay, so we've got this base of amazing talent. What's the next ingredient in their secret sauce of adaptability?
Yeah.
The book talks a lot about candor, and it's not just about being honest.
Right. It's more than that. In the Netflix world, candor means saying what you really think, but with positive intentions. It's about making it safe for people to give and receive honest, even critical feedback, because the goal is to help everyone improve. The individual, the team, the whole company.
And this wasn't something that came easily to Reed Hastings himself, was it? He talks about his struggles with candor, especially back at Pure Software.
Yeah, he's pretty open about that. He says he's naturally conflict avoidant, partly because of how he was raised. Emotions weren't really talked about in his family, so he got good at avoiding tough conversations. It took him a lot of work to get comfortable with giving and receiving constructive criticism.
That makes sense. But there's research in the book that shows why this kind of direct feedback is so valuable. What did those studies show?
There was this study by Zenger-Folkman, and it found that most people actually think that corrective feedback, the stuff that tells you what you need to improve, is more helpful than just positive feedback.
Really?
Yeah. 57% said they actually prefer corrective feedback, and 92% agreed that negative feedback, when done right, makes you better.
Wow.
It's like we know deep down that even though it might sting a bit, that critical feedback is what helps us grow.
It's interesting they use this analogy in the book about speed displays in Garden Grove, California, to explain this feedback loop idea.
Yeah, it's a good one.
What's the connection there?
So Garden Grove, they had this problem with speeding near schools. Just putting up speed limit signs didn't do anything.
People just ignore those.
Exactly. But then they put up these dynamic speed displays so drivers could see their actual speed in real time. Instant feedback. And guess what? Accident rates went way down.
Interesting.
The idea is, just like drivers adjust their speed when they see that feedback, employees can adjust their behavior and performance when they get timely, honest feedback.
Makes sense. But building this kind of culture of open candor, especially in a company, that's tough.
Yeah.
We all have this idea like praise in public, criticize in private.
Yeah, it's ingrained in us. But Netflix recognized that. They knew people hesitate to give candid feedback because they're worried about hurting feelings, damaging relationships. So they tried to create an environment where feedback could be given effectively without causing unnecessary drama, where everyone understood that the intention behind it was good, it was about growth.
It's about trust, right?
Absolutely. They also focused on what's called belonging cues, which comes from Daniel Coyle's work. These are like subtle signals, sometimes nonverbal, that make people feel safe, like they belong. Things like having an appreciative tone of voice, actually leaning in to listen, thanking someone for being brave enough to speak up.
So it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly. And there are some great examples in the book of this upward candor in action at Netflix. Like Brian Wright's first day at the company,
Oh, yeah. What was that story?
he sees this low-level guy, as he puts it, just straight up challenging Ted Sarandos in a meeting.
Ted Sarandos, like the big boss.
Yep. And Brian's like shocked. In his old job, that would have been career suicide. But Ted, he just thanks the guy for his input and later tells Brian that they hire people for their opinions. Holding back feedback because you're spared, that's not the Netflix way.
Wow.
That's a great example of how they valued open discussion and different perspectives.
And then there's Rochelle King's email to Reed Hastings.
Oh, yeah.
That took some guts.
Big time. She felt that Hastings had been dismissive of Patty McCord in a meeting, and she thought, if I stay quiet, that's betraying everything this company stands for.
Wow.
So she writes this email to Hastings, calling him out. She admits she read it a million times before sending it because it was risky, but she did it.
It's amazing.
And the fact that she felt empowered to do that and the book presents it as a pretty normal thing at Netflix, that tells you a lot about their culture.
So they're encouraging candor, but it's not just a free-for-all, right?
Mhm.
They actually train people how to give effective feedback, which is where the 4A feedback model comes in.
Yeah, that's key.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure. The 4A model, it's a way to give constructive criticism that's more likely to be heard and acted on. The first A is aim to assist. So the whole point of the feedback is to help the other person succeed.
Help, not hurt.
Exactly. The second A is actionable. The feedback has to focus on things the person can actually change. It should have concrete examples.
So not just vague complaints?
Right. The book gives this example. Instead of saying your presentation is undermining its own messages, which is kind of useless, you could say, the way you ask for audience input means only the Americans are participating. And even better, if you could find a way to get people from other countries to contribute, that would be great.
So it's about being specific and suggesting solutions.
Exactly. Now, on the receiving end, there's the third A, appreciate. You have to fight that urge to get defensive when you're getting feedback and instead try to listen and be grateful that someone's trying to help you.
That's hard.
It is. And finally, the last A, accept or discard. It's up to the person receiving the feedback to decide what to do with it. The book talks about this guy, Jordan, who got feedback that he kept looking at his watch during meetings in India, which could be seen as disrespectful, so he made a conscious effort to stop doing that.
So you have the power to choose how you respond.
Exactly. And the 4As make it possible to give feedback in the moment, even during a presentation. The book gives an example of Bianca giving feedback to Rose during a presentation, and it works because everyone understands the intention is good.
That's cool.
But the book also warns against confusing candor with just being a jerk. They have this cautionary tale about Justin Becker, who was brilliant, but also kind of a jerk. True candor, it takes thought, preparation, maybe even some coaching to make sure you're doing it right, according to those 4As.
Okay, so we've got this high-performing team, a culture of radical candor. What's next? The book talks about removing controls.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit risky, especially for a growing company.
It does, right. But the thinking is if you have these talented people and they're constantly getting and giving honest feedback, a lot of those traditional controls, the rules and approvals, they become unnecessary. They can even get in the way of progress. So Netflix started experimenting with this, and the big one was removing their formal vacation policy in 2003.
No vacation policy, like at all. That sounds like it could be a disaster. What was the reaction?
Oh, there was definitely anxiety. Some leaders were having nightmares thinking everyone would just take months off at the same time.
Yeah, I can see that.
But a key part of making it work was that the leaders had to set the example. Reed Hastings, he made a point of taking big vacations and talking about them openly. They contrast this with another company that tried a similar thing but failed because the CEO never took vacation.
So it's like do as I do, not as I say.
Exactly. Of course, there were some bumps in the road at Netflix. The book tells these funny stories like the accounting director freaking out and this manager who suddenly got bombarded with vacation requests all at once.
Oh, man.
It wasn't perfect from the start. It took time, a lot of communication, and a shift in mindset. They had to move from rules to trust. And they applied the same idea to expenses.
Okay.
Instead of making a bunch of rules about what people could and couldn't spend, they came up with a guiding principle. Act in Netflix's best interest.
That sounds so vague. How do you even define that? Did it actually work?
They talked about different scenarios to help people understand, like using the company FedEx account to send a personal Christmas gift. Probably not in Netflix's best interest.
Makes sense.
But flying business class on a red eye so you can be fresh for a big presentation to win a major client, that might be totally justified.
Hmm.
They tell this great story about a junior engineer, Nigel Baptiste, who bought a really expensive TV without asking permission.
Uh-oh.
But he did it because he thought it was crucial for testing their streaming service to make sure the quality was top notch. And it turned out to be a good call.
Okay.
There was a Wall Street Journal article by this guy Fowler that specifically mentioned how House of Cards looked incredible in ultra high definition because of that TV.
Wow. So they gave people the freedom to make those calls.
Yeah, and they trusted them to do the right thing. The book contrasts this with how things worked at Viacom. There, they had all these strict rules, and sometimes that actually encouraged people to spend up to the limit, even if they didn't need to. And then at Netflix, with this act in Netflix's best interest idea, people were actually more careful with spending because they felt personally accountable.
That's interesting.
It shows how rules can sometimes backfire. And the book ties this back to Hastings' time at Pure Software, where they tried to control things with a ton of rules, and it just stifled creativity and drove away some of their best, most innovative people.
It's like they learned from their mistake.
Yeah, totally.
So you see this amazing journey at Netflix. They start as this struggling startup, doing things pretty conventionally, and they evolve into this company built on trust, high performance, and radical candor. They actually remove controls, give people more freedom, and it works.
That's exactly it. They challenge the idea that bigger companies need more rules and more top-down control. They show that if you prioritize talent and build a culture of open feedback, you can empower people and create a company that's more agile, innovative, and successful.
So for you, the listener, taking it all in, what are the key takeaways here?
I think there are three big ones. First, building a team of stunning colleagues, those top performers. It's fundamental. Second, fostering that culture of radical candor, but doing it thoughtfully, making people feel safe, setting clear expectations.
Right.
And third, that sometimes the best way to control things is to actually remove controls. It's about trusting your people to do the right thing, moving away from rigid rules and towards a clear understanding of what's best for the company.
And Netflix's story, it's not just a business case study. It's a different way of thinking about organizations. They really flip the script on the traditional approach. It's about empowerment, trust, and open communication. And it makes you think, how could I apply these principles to my own work, my community, even my personal relationships? How can I create more freedom and responsibility, more open dialogue, and ultimately a more successful and adaptable environment? It's a lot to chew on.
It is. There's a lot to learn from Netflix's journey.